Hey everybody, happy Halloween. It's about 2 days before Halloween. I've gathered together 5 or 6 scary horror stories for a Halloween video, and I hope you enjoy it. Just one thing I want to say. If parents, I would listen to this before you let your children, especially young children. They're not just really super duper graphic stories, but a couple of them could be scary to a kid. So you listen to it before you let your children listen to it, and make sure you're good with them hearing these type of stories. That's all I wanted to say. All that said, let's get rolling with some scary Halloween stories. All right, here we go. Seemed like the perfect day for a walk. The sun was shining, the leaves were just starting to change color, and the biting cold of impending winter was just around the corner. James decided to finally check out the Riverside Trail that went past his apartments. The view, according to one of his neighbors, was beautiful this time of year. They weren't wrong, James thought, watching an orange leaf float down the river. While he considered turning around and making his way back home, James noticed something in the distance along the side of the trail near a tree. It looked like a dollar bill. When he could see it clearly, he discovered a $100 bill. He was thrilled. He immediately began to think of what he would buy with his new find. James knelt down to pick up the bill, and just as his fingertips connected with the money, he was struck on the back of the head. "Sorry about all this," the stranger said. James' eyes fluttered open. What? Where am I?" He was lying on the ground and his head was pounding. From his spot in the grass, James could feel that the back of his head was wet. He was bleeding. "You're nowhere important," the stranger replied. "Listen, I'm not going to tell you whether to cry out for help or not. I'd appreciate it if you did, but I'm not picky." James looked down and saw that the stranger was making sure that the chain attached to his ankle was secure. The other end was nailed to the ground with a stake. His duffel bag of supplies had more clamps and chains inside. The stranger stood up. "Okay, now, scream or don't scream. Do whatever you want." He picked up his bag and started walking away. James got to his feet. Wait, what are you doing? Let me go." "No can do, friend," the stranger called out as he walked away. "On second thought, keep yelling. I like that." James started pulling at the chain. The stake wasn't budging, and the clasp around his ankle seemed secure. He wasn't going anywhere, and then panic set in. Hey, what are you doing? Where am I? Help me!" James looked around and could only see trees around the small clearing. The stranger set his bag down near a tree. He reached over and picked up a rifle, and then James thought he could see the man looking at him through his scope. "Don't shoot me, please, don't shoot!" James screamed, cowering in fear. "Why are you doing this?" A loud, rolling roar rang out through the forest not far from him. He heard branches breaking. Some creature was heading their way. "That's why," the stranger called out. Oh my God, James realized, watching a large form approach inside the tree line. He looked over at the stranger, who may as well have become invisible in the tangled brush. He's hunting something else. Oh my God, I'm the bait! I went for a run like I always do. I typically go around 7 to 8 p.m. and I run for an hour, maybe less. There's always a section of my usual route that is dark. No close street lights or lights from homes. I got close to that dark area and I turned on my flashlight. I looked across the street and I saw a figure sitting on the ground in front of a house. All the lights were off in the home and it appeared no one was there. My first thought was that this is a Halloween decoration because it looked stiff. Just sitting there, no movement. I became curious and stepped into the yard and pointed my flashlight at the dark-cladded figure. It wore a strange-looking garment. I thought it was silk because the slightest breeze made the material shimmer and move. The figure itself did not move. The strangest thing, though, its face was blacked out. I could not make out a plastic mask or the usual material someone would use to create a mask. I know this sounds absurd, but it was like the figure's face was clouded or blank. I should have been able to see a nose or something, but it was dark and shadows conceal what we would see in the daylight. I switched my light to strobe, hoping to get a reaction, but still nothing happened. Not wanting to move closer, I felt like a fool, but I was satisfied that it was a Halloween prop. That clouded face stuck with me, though. I backed out of the yard, afraid to turn my back on this harmless Halloween figure, and I continued my run. Upon returning home, I went inside and drank some water to hydrate after my run. That face was bothering me. There was something off about the whole thing. I couldn't let it go. Stupid me had to go see this thing again, and outside I went into the cool fall air. I rounded the corner to the dark street and approached the house. The figure was gone. How could that be? It was perfectly motionless when I stood only 20 feet from it. Where had it gone? I switched on my light again, and I saw no trace of the thing. I pointed the light to the house and looked around. Nothing. Feeling like a cat burglar and not wanting someone to call the police, I began to move out of the front yard. Suddenly, I backed into a large tree and I dropped my light, scaring myself to death. When I picked up the light, it shined up to the second floor of the house. In a large window, I noticed a shape. The shape was vague, but not obscured by anything. Just hard to make out, even with the light on it. But when my eyes adjusted, I knew it was a person. A big person. Unless the window was built low to the floor, making whomever this was look very tall, it was taller than any human I had ever seen. And then it moved slightly. I froze in my tracks. I could not take my eyes off of this thing. When I could make out red spots where the eyes should be, I turned and ran. It was the creepiest thing I had ever seen in my life. I ran as fast as I could back home and I called the police and told them the whole story. They said they would send a car to check it out. I stood on my lawn and waited. Down the street and around the corner, I saw lights as if the squad car had arrived, and I moved closer to the corner and I watched. 2 officers knocked on the door without getting a response. They eventually gave up and walked around the house. They returned to their car and pulled towards me. When they turned the corner, I waved them down and I explained that I was the woman who made the report. They told me they had not found anything that would provoke them to search further, and they drove away. I did a little research and found that the owners had sold the house 6 months prior. So the house is empty, but there's no for sale sign in the yard. It's all very intriguing, yet scary to me. I want to contact the previous owners, but I'm not able to find their new address nor their phone numbers listed anywhere. I find myself driving by the house at night. I have changed my running route, but twice I've given into the curiosity and run by at night, slowing while I run so as to see into the yard. I have not seen anything strange since that night, but I can feel it from the house. There's something wrong with this house. I've spoken with the next door neighbor who has a key to the house. He was friends with the owners and they had given him a key years ago in case of emergency. He has lived in the house for 35 years. I asked him if he thought we should go into the house and check it out, but he says that there's no way that he is trespassing on property that he does not own. And he was so weird about it, I think that he knows more than he's letting on. His house is for sale too. It all started in the corner of his eye. At first the man thought it was a fleck of dust, but rubbing his eye did nothing. After work, he set up an appointment with an ophthalmologist, as any man facing such a problem should. As his wife drove home to the doctor, he lost sight in his left eye. By the time they reached the office, the man was essentially blind. Still, he felt it move like a salmon does against a current. Each movement caused him agony. His wife yelled words that he could not understand at the assistant. It all began to blur in his mind. "I'm sorry, miss, but we can't help you unless you calm down." Before the assistant could finish her sentence, the man collapsed. His wife would have screamed, but the charade was over. Conversations came to a screeching halt, and what were once animated faces turned into dim expressions as the man's head split open. One by one, the actors left the room to stand in the observation deck. They had witnessed this before. The creature's grotesque form collapsed onto the tiled floor. It shuddered and yelped like an animal dragged away from its fetid womb. The others had never been this animated. Most died with their hosts. Behind the glass, a woman takes a drag of her cigarette and is the first to speak up. Finally, our work can truly begin, and the room filled with thunderous applause. My home isn't like other houses. At night, I can hear noises that others don't have to deal with. Many nights, the sounds are faint, almost non-existent, but occasionally the sounds become amplified to the point I can't ignore them. This is one of those nights, and it's driving me crazy. I can hear scratching, clawing, whimpering, and even chains rustling as an echo permeates through the walls of my home. I try not to let the noises get to me, but I can't possibly sleep with all this activity going on. I've seen shows on the paranormal, and the residents of those homes have different methods to drain out sound. They put in earbuds, sleep with the television volume up, and some are just too spooked to leave the home altogether. But my situation is different. I can't just ignore the sounds that could lead to some big problems. I can't just abandon the house. That would raise too many questions. I will have to try to alleviate the noise situation the same way I have in the past. I stumble out of bed and make my way downstairs to the source of the noise. I open the basement door and flip on the light. "One more sound out of you tonight, and I'm taking your other hand off." I return to my bed, and I can feel a grin forming as I shut my eyes. Finally, peace and quiet. I slammed my fist into the table again while cursing loudly. I had just lost my 10th game of the night. I was extremely frustrated and tired. My controller was sweaty. My friends really are right when they say that I'm a sweaty player. Finishing off the last of my Monster Energy drink, I yawned loudly and looked at the time in the corner of my monitor. 1:30 a.m. I guess it's time to sleep, I thought. I shut down my PC and rose out of the chair. I jumped into my messy, comfy bed, not even bothering to brush my teeth. Yes, you can call me a lousy gamer. The leaves rustled outside and I could hear a dog howling in the distance. It was deathly quiet. Other nights were usually quiet too, but this one had a weird atmosphere. The eerie silence mixed with the creepy natural sounds made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. It felt as if I was living in a remote hut in the middle of the woods. I brushed the uneasy feeling off and blamed it on my sleep deprivation. I rolled over so I was facing away from the window, and I soon dozed off. A raspy, whistling voice woke me up. I dismissed it, thinking it was just the wind. The same eerie silence surrounded me as I closed my eyes. Then I heard it loud and clear, the same whistling voice, this time louder than usual. I opened my eyes wide in shock. The sound was coming from my window. It repeated again, as if mocking me. I was paralyzed in fear. Suddenly, a terrifying realization came to my mind. I had left the window unlocked. The only thing between me and whatever was on the other side of the window was a thin pane of glass that could be moved aside. I was surrounded by creepy thoughts, and I realized that the whistling had stopped completely. I waited another few minutes for good measure and then slowly rolled over to the window side. And that's when I screamed. On the other side of the window was a grotesque creature. As soon as I locked eyes with it, my stomach churned. Its eyes looked like massive pus-filled blisters with blood and red pupils. It had a massive cut in place of a nose. It opened its mouth. There were rows and rows of dagger-sharp teeth, way too many to fit in its mouth. Its tongue was a long green tentacle slithering around. It emitted disgusting wheezing sounds as it slowly opened the window and crawled in my room. It had a human figure and oddly looked human too, except for the facial features. I'm currently typing this in my bathroom. It's making the whistling sounds again and constantly rattling the door. Blood is seeping out from under the door. I don't know how long I'm going to survive. I was already tired from a long day at work. I waited a while in front of the door to my apartment with my key in my hand. I could already hear my young son screaming bloody murder. I opened the door and climbed up our long apartment stairs. My wife was washing dishes with a defeated look on her face. She gave me a half smile and said in a voice that sounded tired as I felt, "Yay, Daddy's home." I nodded in the direction of our son's room. He was still screaming, only taking breaks to gulp air in between his bellows. My wife shrugged and said, "I showed him his new Halloween costume, a vampire suit. He pitched a fit and broke down completely and said I got the wrong one." I sighed in solidarity. We never had to deal with the terrible twos with our son. Instead, he must have bottled all of that up for his 5th birthday. Every day since has been an absolute battle to get him to eat his food, clean his room, and go to sleep, among other daily struggles. My wife reached into the sink absent-mindedly, only to pull up nothing. She shook her head as she explained, "I keep doing that. I just reach for a plate that I've already washed and put in the drying rack. I am so tired. Can you please deal with him?" I nodded and shuffled my way to my precious boy's door. My wife warned me, "He's extra mad that I wouldn't let him have his meltdown in the kitchen, so I shooed him into his room about 10 minutes before you got home." I understood that my wife had already reached her limits and the kitchen isn't the safest place for a kid, but I was still annoyed. Our boy was so strong-willed and already desperate for independence. He could calm down from a temper tantrum eventually, but you just had to leave him alone. Any attempt at control would just prolong the fit. My plan was simply to sit in a corner and let him bawl until he was ready to come over for a hug. I've lost count how many times I've done this. But I knew it wasn't a normal meltdown as soon as I opened the door and I saw blood. My son stood there with a pilfered kitchen knife. His left arm from his hand to his elbow was degloved of flesh and skin, and he was pulling more skin away. He looked at me with hatred and determination equal in their intensity as he screamed, "I don't want to be a vampire. I'm going to be a skeleton." I remember the night clearly. The full moon's blinding light shone through the windows. The icy wind slipped through the cracks in the walls. The castle's damp wooden floors creaked as I stumbled along, a trespasser. My left leg was a bloody, tattered mess. My clothes were torn and I was bleeding from several cuts and scrapes. Over my shoulder were 3 bed sheets tied together. A silver revolver glistened in my right hand. I alone knew the Von Trapp family's secret. I knew why so many people had wandered into their estate and never come out. I had to escape, otherwise I would soon be taking the secret to my grave. Behind me I could hear a savage, wild howling, the sound of paws beating against the wood. I staggered onto a balcony, hastily tied the bed sheets to the railing, grabbed on tightly, and I threw myself over. As I slid down, waves of pain rippled through my leg. The freezing wind licked at my wounds. I began to feel lightheaded, but I bit my tongue and I held on. I reached the bottom and collapsed into a clump of snow. My heart was racing, my head was swimming. I managed to drag myself along the ground towards a clearing in the dense forest surrounding the mansion. A gust of wind blew and a tree deposited some snow right on top of me. But I was too weak to resist. More howling, closer this time, and the sound of paws trampling on the snow. A chill ran down my spine. Slowly, I lifted my head out of the snow, and I found myself looking at a monster, a beast, a werewolf. It stood a short distance away, its fiery red eyes drilling holes through me. Its wet black snout sniffed the air. The body was humanoid but covered in fur. Its enormous feet like snow boots and its large bat-like ears twitching, listening. Such a creature should not exist, I told myself. This was an abomination, a violation of nature. I silently dropped my head and prayed that enough snow and sludge had fallen to cover me. Suddenly, a raspy, cold voice echoed through the air. I know you're there. I smell your blood. I hear your flesh calling out to me. I panicked. I leapt up and fired my revolver. A burst of blood erupted from the werewolf's chest. It snarled with annoyance and advanced towards me almost leisurely. I turned around and hobbled away as fast as I could. My legs screamed, my vision blurred. Branches and twigs snagged my face. I kept going steadily downhill. Then I lost my balance. I fell and I started rolling. Down, down, down I went. I shot into the river with a splash. In the distance I heard screams and howls. The water was cold as death. My leg was hurting worse than ever. I just wanted to close my eyes and go to sleep. I saw a shadow looming over me. Everything faded to black. Okay guys, I hope you enjoyed that Halloween video. It was fun for me to do. The next, we'll be getting back into Bigfoot and cryptid stories on the next video. Just wanted to do a little Halloween thing, just for fun. Alright, you guys have a good week and we'll see you on the next one. Thanks!